rescue me before I sink, lose the ship at sea. I said, hey, yo, well, you came so fast, saved it last, your kiss was mutiny. I said, hey, yo, save me from disaster, save me from the wreck that's gonna come, save me from disaster. It's been good for too long, and I took a leap of faith, and I've never fallen faster. Catch me in your arms, save me from disaster. I ride the ship, but I'm bound to slip. The water's to my knees. I said, hey, yo, good for nothing. Breakdown's coming.
We are broadcasting live from the sovereign state of Jefferson, and we will do so every Thursday at 7 p.m. until further notice. I am Drew Lamb, and here with me tonight are my co-hosts, David West and Chuck Horton. So at the moment, let's just jump into some Fukushima news and radiation weather. Right now, we just saw a plume go by while we were talking before the show. My Geiger counter was showing 62 CPMs, and I was looking at Geiger counts on radiationnetwork.com, and I was noticing that counts across the nation were kind of high. There's another Geiger counter in Oregon near the coast that's showing 54 CPMs, and another one in Montana is showing 57 CPMs. Go over to Minnesota, we're seeing 58 CPMs, 59 near Wisconsin. That one just went up. 63 near Oyster Creek. So we're seeing some pretty high counts right now. I think that this is associated with the weather. Fukushima fallout can come down in the rain and the snow. And so we typically notice higher counts during wet weather conditions. If you're seeing higher counts during dry weather or warm days, it's radioactive material that's already on the ground, and it tends to get more active during the warmer weather. And you'll see higher counts, especially near the ground. If you take a reading near the ground during warm weather, you'll notice that. Let's see. Let's get into some more news here. A recent report from TEPCO stated that they had a cooling system failure in the spent fuel pool of Fukushima Unit Number 3. I'm surprised that Unit 3 even has a spent fuel pool that holds water or contains spent fuel, given that the spent fuel pool detonated last year and it sent a MOX fuel aerosol high into the atmosphere. Last night, while I was watching the TEPCO Fukuichi cam, I observed a crane holding some sort of box over Unit 3, and I suspect that maybe they were taking heat and radiation measurements. But rest assured, there'll be more radiation blowing in the jet stream, and those of us who live downwind need to stay out of the rain. Like I said, I've noticed higher counts. I've gotten up to 80 CPMs on rainwater, and that happened shortly after the meltdowns. It takes about 4 days for fallout to blow over here, and even Arnie Gunnarsson has said that the radioactive material piles up on the Cascades, and it comes down in the snow and the rain. And so we need to be aware of this, and recommend that people get some water filters. I've been using a couple water filters for the last year and a half. I've got a Berkey that's got some carbon elements on there, and I also have a Pure Effect water system that has a zeolite water filter on there. Zeolite clay is a great way to filter out radioactive isotopes. Let's see, I was surprised to find an article about hazards of nuclear power, Fukushima, and Superstorm Sandy on a mainstream site like time.com. An article titled "Nuclear Power and Superstorms Don't Mix" by Lucy Birmingham calls for any nuclear power, although in a naive and misinformed way, in my opinion. Birmingham writes, Superstorm Sandy's unexpected wrath makes a powerful case for revisiting Fukushima and the dangers to nuclear energy from natural disasters. As Sandy made landfall in Atlantic City, Oyster Creek Nuclear Power Plant nearby was fortunately on scheduled outage, but Indian Point 3 in Buchanan, New York, 9 Mile Point 1 in Screven, New York, and Salem Unit 1 in Hancock's Bridge, New Jersey, all experienced shutdowns because of high water levels or electrical disruption. Last year, the dangerous Fukushima nuclear power plant meltdown was caused by similar conditions after tsunami waves flooded the plant and short-circuited both the regular and backup electrical systems. It was actually a problem with the diesel generators. We've discussed this before. They're in the basement of those buildings, and they were flooded, and they couldn't operate. So that was why they didn't have backup power. It goes on. Equally dangerous are drought and record heat conditions the U.S. experienced last summer. In August, one of 2 reactors at the Millstone Nuclear Power Plant near New London, Connecticut, not far from where I grew up, the author, was shut down because water in Long Island Sound needed to cool the reactors, got too warm. Cool water is necessary to produce electricity. And that's not entirely accurate. The cool water is to cool the spent fuel. And that's why nuclear power is not a good way to boil water. The whole process works through boiling water reactors. And so this fuel gets really hot, it boils water, the steam turns turbines, and you get electricity. But you also get spent fuel that has to be continuously cooled forever and ever and ever, and there ends up being more and more and more of it. And there can be a lot of it at sites that have been operating for 40 years or so, like Oyster Creek. And so the real problem, even if like a reactor like Oyster Creek, which currently is showing zero output, so they're still having problems there and relying on some sort of backup power to run their cooling systems. But these old plants have lots and lots of spent fuel stored on site, and trying to keep that cool requires a lot of energy, and is really dangerous if there's any kind of a failure. And that's why nuclear power is not the solution. It's not an efficient way to produce energy. It's not a sustainable way to produce energy. And really, we need to look for better ways and get away from this. I mean, really, the purpose of these plants is to store weapons-grade uranium and plutonium, to enrich these materials and use them for weapons. Let's get on to some other headlines. Indeed, there have been plenty of disturbing headlines this week, and this is one I noticed on Energy News. Astonishing thyroid abnormalities found in Fukushima kids declared okay by government. Officials ordered doctors to stop examining patients. The article links to a white paper published on simplyinfo.org, the Fukushima Project. The white paper covers a health survey of children who live in Fukushima Prefecture. Dr. Suzuki, who has been running the health survey along with Dr. Yamashita, claimed that it is unlikely thyroid cancer rates would rise, and that the results found so far, over 43% of children had abnormalities, were ordinary. These statements by Suzuki defy evidence. Over 43% of children with abnormalities is quite different from the 1.6% or less of children in the Nagasaki study. Suzuki has also held the opinion that thyroid cancers won't show up for 4 or more years, citing Chernobyl. This conflicts with Suzuki's claim that it is unlikely cancer rates would rise. Further evidence shows thyroid damage was actually occurring right after Chernobyl. It just took years for studies to actually be done. While the health survey claims everything is fine in Fukushima, parents are documenting quite a different reality. Ian Thomas Ashe has been producing a serial documentary series on the life after the Fukushima disaster. In his most recent filming, he's been interviewing parents in the Fukushima City and Date City. What he found is astonishing. Children with considerable thyroid abnormalities were declared okay by the health survey, only to find out otherwise, that they obtained a second opinion from a doctor. That is for those lucky enough to obtain a second opinion. Some were denied treatment by doctors after the central government ordered them to stop examining patients for thyroid disorders. I'd also like to point out that the Japanese government asked journalists to stop reporting on the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant disaster because the information might upset people. Since the beginning of the Fukushima meltdowns, 4 of my friends or family members have been diagnosed with cancer. This week, I got an email from a cousin who currently resides in Montana telling me that she's been diagnosed with a rare form of cancer in her bladder. One of my friends recently had his stomach and esophagus removed, and another is being treated for ovarian, brain, and neck cancers. This white paper also links to a blog called Documenting Ian. In an entry to the blog on November 5th, Ian writes about a mother whose children aged 11 and 13 both have thyroid cysts. Their mother, Mrs. Shima, stated that the children wear badges that measure the overall radiation exposure. However, the government subtracts background radiation from the measurement. Also, doctors had one of the children remove the badge when getting an x-ray for an unrelated medical issue. So there really seems to be, a culture that is covering up the truth here. But even from what I see in my own life, people aren't really looking to the cause and why all these people are getting cancer. And just in my personal life, I'm experiencing this, and it's really getting upsetting. And I really fear for the future. And I'm just disturbed by how people fail to connect the dots and so quickly succumb to the cancer treatment culture. Chuck, do you have any comments on this?
Yeah, I do. This kind of ties in a little bit with our my subject of last week of the medical tyranny, that the general public has so much faith in their doctors and in the government to protect them that they just can't conceive that they could be lied to, or that someone doesn't know enough to tell, that what they're being recommended by their doctor, what it isn't, a good thing to do. And it isn't just the United States, it's probably around the world where they're doctors, because their status has been overly inflated or overrated for decades. And it's kind of been pounded into people's brains that, they know more than you do. They're the best and the brightest. You need to do what they do. And they have that kind of aura about them. You don't question me. I'm a doctor, and they kill over 120,000 people a year in the United States. It's, they're not gods. They're just men like everybody else, and they make a lot of mistakes. And malpractice insurance wouldn't be as expensive as it is if they weren't making lots of mistakes. And so they make mistakes in how serious they think radiation is. They're told by their superiors that this is not a problem. We treat people with radiation for cancer all the time, and they try and make reasoned, rational arguments for just burying your head in the sand. And I'm reminded that story of a stock trader who's in one of the 2 towers that got hit by a plane on 9/11, and the building's being evacuated, and he's sitting in his office making trades, shorting the airline industry stocks and making millions of dollars, because he just refuses to believe that the building can collapse. It just is not something that it's a reality that he's not going to accept. And so he was crushed to death when the building collapses. And that's kind of where a lot of people are. They're at that state where they're not going to open their eyes and see reality. They prefer this, that they've taken the blue pill. They're going to stay asleep because it's more comfortable.
Yes, indeed. It's a normalcy bias, and it's this belief that if something has never happened before, that it can't ever happen. So there's been a lot of news this week. What else would you guys like to talk about right now?
Well, I think there's some great economic lessons to be learned from Hurricane Sandy. First of all, storing hard assets like food and water and weapons and things that the preppers go for isn't such a bad idea after all. I think a lot of people that have lived through this have realized that, hey, yeah, being prepared isn't such a bad idea. That's number one. That seemed to be obvious.
If you go to FEMA's website, they tell people to prepare, but they don't tell them to prepare adequately. They tell people to have 3 days worth of food, water, medications, and so on, which is completely inadequate. I think that you should have 3 years worth if you can.
Yeah, FEMA's websites always cracked me up. They tell you to be prepared, but yeah, they tell you to have 3 days of emergency supplies, which, realistically, that's about what you should have in a backpack ready to grab and run with it if you have to. That should be your bug out bag, your go bag, not what you have stocked up to wait out an emergency. And of course, the other very noteworthy thing missing from FEMA's recommendations is weapons. They do not tell people anything about being able to defend themselves. FEMA's whole thing is they just want you to just hold tight and be ready for us to come rescue you. It's never about, hey, this is what you need to have to take care of yourself in a situation like this. And as we've seen time and time again, FEMA's pretty terrible at their job. So people should definitely take their recommendations with a grain of salt.
Well, they were stocking up on MREs. What was it last year? A lot of the dehydrated food manufacturers were refusing orders. They weren't filling orders to the public or retail stores because they were working on orders for FEMA and government orders. So where are all of these MREs and their response to the Sandy superstorm was pretty poor. It was slow. They even ran out of bottled water, and I think it was yesterday. I saw some pictures on Facebook where some of the sites that people were supposed to go to get assistance were closed due to inclement weather. That's just ridiculous. So who has all of these MREs that they've been stocking up, and who are they stocking them for? They're not for the public. I mean, it sounds really cool to have some sort of organization in place where if you need something, it's there for you. But it seems that we're paying to get a lot of nothing, and it seems that the FEMA system waits until people are absolutely desperate before.
Sounds like they're just trying to keep supplies out of the marketplace.
Exactly.
Or they're putting that stuff away for the elites.
Yeah, it's true. Both of those.
Yeah, I was wondering about that myself. They're in underground bunkers someplace. Same with all the ammo all these agencies have been purchasing.
I also wanted to interject. I thought there was a tremendous economic lesson there for people that might be interested in the dismal science. I'm going to defend the indefensible now for just a few minutes, and I'm going to defend price gouging. Price gouging is noble. That is the one thing that ensures that scarce resources that have alternate uses are put to their highest use, is by raising the price. And as the price goes up, demand for those resources will fall. People aren't going to use them for questionable activities. They're going to use them for things that are really, really important only. And as supplies, are once again come back into the market and people have oversupply, they'll drop their prices to increase demand. And that's the most efficient and the best way to allocate resources is let the market set prices. So that's just something that people can find out. And when you go in there and you say, you can't price gouge. This is the price limit. What happens is people line up in 2, 3, 4 mile long lines to get gas, and they can't supply the demand because the price is too low. And so you run out. You have shortages. You have rationing. And people that really need it, where it's a life and death situation, aren't going to be able to get it. When you would
One of the
anything...
other... Oh,
Go ahead, David.
Sorry to cut you off, Chuck. But one of the other things I was going to say is that people always act like these, so-called price gougers are just terrible people. Like, oh, they're just greedy. You can't charge more in a disaster. But the truth is, they're not even looking at these, store owners or business owners as being humans. They're just looking at it as this big faceless company. But that's not the case. Any business, any gas station, any store is ran by people. And you know what? These people are out there selling you things in the storm. They could be risking their lives or taking themselves away from their family that probably needs help. They're going out of their way to serve people. Like, is it that crazy to think that they deserve more compensation for it? Like, even if it wasn't just a matter of controlling the supply and demand, and making sure to give an incentive for suppliers to get more supplies in there, and if it wasn't making sure that the demand would just wipe out the supplies instantly, they still, I would say, have every right, and of course, no matter what, they have the right to, but they can, without feeling guilty about it, charge people more money. And also, the other thing I was going to say is that, people always act like price gougers are terrible, but would any of these people say, oh, you're a terrible person if the minute a storm happened, you ran in and wiped out the entire bottled water supply at the lower price, and then no one else was able to get any? Like, I mean, people just don't think the whole situation through. They just have a knee-jerk reaction to it.
Yeah, and that's one other thing is when the prices go up, it becomes economical to bring supplies from greater distances away, and so that's the best way to get supplies there. And the government has shown that they were horrible at filling the need and demand for anything during this emergency. And if they had let the prices go up, there had been truck lines, lined up to get into that area and deliver services because there'd be money to be made for it.
And yet the Wall Street Journal yesterday reported that the price of oil went down due to lackluster demand due to Superstorm Sandy.
And the lackluster demand was caused by people who have gas stations just turning off the lights and going home because they work on really small margins, and it isn't going to be worthwhile for them to bring in supplies from further away because then they'll lose money for every gallon they pump. So they just say, forget it, I'm not going to deal with it.
Yeah. That's what I'd do. What's the point? And your costs, most of your costs are fixed, and in a situation like that, your costs are going to go up. Most likely you're going to have damages and repairs, things like that, and also you're going to have other products that you couldn't get shipped to you, so your shelves are empty, and you're not going to have an opportunity to sell those things, so your sales are going to be down, your costs are going to be up. So what you were able to get in stock, you are going to have to charge more anyway, just to pay the bills.
And I really lost respect for Governor Christie. Not that I had a whole bunch before that, but he was a total clown, getting up there and demonizing all these people for price gouging. And he should have, if he understood economics at all, he would understand that that's the last thing they are. The free market has the mechanism there to provide all the things that are missing if you just let it operate. But when you step in and you start doing things like rent control, or in this case, price fixing, you destroy the market. And you destroy all the mechanisms that are there to provide goods and services to people who need them.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know, Christie seemed to be somewhat of a tyrant. I heard him criticizing a mayor. I can't remember which city. Do you guys remember, who had told people not to evacuate? And said they didn't have to evacuate. He was going off about how he had issued a command for people to evacuate. I don't think he has that kind of authority. I think I mean, if 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 you get information saying that you ought to evacuate, and it's very accurate information. Well, you ought to, and if you don't and you need help, well, you get what's coming to you, I suppose. Um, or you should have been super prepared. And if you weren't prepared to bug in and you chose to bug in when advised to bug out, well, that's on you. But it's your choice. If you want to stay, you want
I
to
know.
stay.
Just one last parting comment, and I think we should leave this. But if I pull in a gas station and it's $15 a gallon, I'm going to be pretty upset. But I'm going to be happy that I'm able to put gas in my car. I probably will only buy as much as I absolutely have to because I don't want to spend $15 a gallon for gas. So that's going to ensure that I ration it, I use it wisely, and that's what prices do. They give you information. The pricing information you're getting is this resource has become incredibly scarce. Be careful how you use it. And when it's still being sold at the prevailing price it was before the hurricane, you're not getting that information. You're thinking, well, somebody is holding it back, trying to screw me over or something. And but it isn't true. The people that are holding it back are the government, and they're doing it because they're trying to get votes. And it just they demonize the people who are out there that can actually provide something to other people, and they're the ones that are causing all the problem. And it's always the case. The government people, they're just clowns.
Mhm.
So we should move on. We've hammered this enough, I think.
So what do you guys? What's your take on the outcome of the election? I was looking at one of those maps that has voting results grouped up, in red and blue colored maps, and you can clearly see all the city slickers colored in blue.
Yeah, I think there's one reform that could be done to the electoral college is have each state could have two at-large electors, which would represent their Senate, their two senators, and then they could have one elector for each congressional district. And that way, we have congressional district 2. We often vote completely different than the rest of the state of Oregon, but at least we would have our interests being met. We would have an elector that casts a ballot the way we cast our ballots. And so I think that would be a reform that would make the elections a lot more representative to people, and it would stop centralizing power in population centers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think we still need the electoral college. Direct democracy would just be mob rule.
Well, I think that would make the population centers have even more power.
Yeah, I agree. It is disturbing though when you look at these maps and you just see that the votes are concentrated in these metropolitan areas, and I've lived in big cities. I've lived in big metro areas, and the problems that you have, the issues that you face are quite a bit different than those issues when you live in a rural area like we do, or rural and suburban areas. And so those people don't really represent our interests, and they don't understand our needs, and in some cases our values for that matter. And so it is disturbing. Looking at that, and you feel double crossed yet again.
Another reason to secede.
Yes, exactly. I think it's a good case for it. What do you guys think about Measure 80 not passing in Oregon? That was the measure to legalize marijuana and hemp. There were similar measures on the ballots in Colorado and Washington. I think those passed.
I think both in Washington State and in Colorado they passed about 2-1, and it went down by almost 2-1 in Oregon. And I think it was because of the ballot measure was worded very weirdly, and it was also there was a lot of state control was going to be put in place, and I don't think a lot of people thought that was a good thing.
You always hear this argument that says, hey, legalize marijuana, just tax it and regulate it. Like that makes it okay. Like suddenly if there's tax collected on it, then it's okay.
you still wouldn't be able to grow it in your backyard because they'd come by and they'd say, "Where's the tax stamp on that hemp?"
Right, exactly. And then it still violates federal law. And so you still have issues. And we see this all the time with people that are involved in medical marijuana. They still get raided. They still get SWAT teamed. Sheriff Winters is still pointing out their house. It's those guys over there. But do you guys think that Measure 80 not passed in Oregon had much to do with the timber industry here? And do you think it had anything to do with the price of illegal weed? There's a lot of people that wouldn't want it legalized because it would hurt the price.
I've wondered about that personally. I'm pretty sure that it lost by a margin of upwards of like 10%. It was like 55% against it to 45% in favor, which obviously, there's not enough people with a vested interest in keeping marijuana illegal to offset it that drastically. You'd have to be talking about upwards of 5% of the population wanting to keep it that way. The law itself, I actually think the Oregon measure, it wasn't great, but it was better from what I understand, at least than the Washington measure. I believe the Washington measure, you need to get some kind of I don't think you can actually grow your own. I almost think you can only buy it from like state stores. It's the Washington one had a lot more government controls. I voted in favor of Measure 80. I mean, it wasn't ideal. I didn't at all like the idea that it would create a whole nother regulatory agency. Although to be fair, the revenue generated by it would have more than covered the cost of the regulatory agency. So it's not like it would have just been a black hole of spending. Theoretically,
but it would be a wealth transfer from people producing something that other people want.
It would,
to
and
people
I mean,
that just live off the system.
Yeah, and I mean to an extent, I agree with that. You could probably make a libertarian case arguing against it, saying, hey, these people who are selling it illegally now are making, I believe, an honest living. Why change that and make it so now they're losing money? And but ultimately, just the fact that people were going to be able to grow and use it without any licensing or restrictions or anything, that was why I voted in favor of it, because I am really sick of seeing people get arrested and thrown in cages over, the possession of a plant. But I can see some sense in not liking it. I wish that they would just fully decriminalize it and at most treat it like any other product. Instead of having special taxes on marijuana, just, well, I guess in Oregon you'd have no taxes on it because there's no sales tax. Instead of having to have some kind of license to sell it commercially, just, make people have to have a business license, which is also a concept I don't like and I disapprove of, but if it's just going to be treated like any other product, that would make more sense to me.
Well, they could put an excise tax on it like they do with beer. But all that does is fund another bureaucracy that harasses the producers.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
There's
kind of a tough scenario.
There's also there's a lot of other products associated with hemp, ropes, clothing. There's the nuts from the hemp seeds are real nutritious. There's oils that you can press out of it that are said to have health benefits. You can make biodiesel out of it, and it sells for about $4 a gallon, today's dollar. It's there's just a lot of it's a miracle plant. The fact that it's been demonized as such is I don't know. It's just beyond my belief system, I guess. It's one of those things I have trouble understanding how people can.
Well, yeah, and none of those products come from the timber industry. I mean, do you guys think that industrial hemp production in Oregon would have an adverse effect on the timber industry?
Well, it does. You can make it into a building product that would have a little bit of competitive thing against the timber industry. But I tell you, I'd rather be harvesting hemp than trees for building products. Trees have a lot of other benefits. They hold the soil. it's when you have up in the mountains where you have all the snow, the trees keep it from washing all the soil away. It's part of our ecosystem, and they're a little more important than a hemp plant that you can grow down in the valley on a flat acreage.
My family's been involved in the timber industry in Oregon going back to the late 1890s, and I can't recall my grandfather ever speaking out against industrial hemp. I don't think he had a problem with it.
I think the competition would be very slight, and I don't think it'd be a big problem.
Yeah, I don't either. What's your take on this, David? You come from a timber family.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I didn't really follow too much like who was lobbying for or against the bill, so I don't know if I'd go so far as to say that this time around, at least, the timber industry is responsible for it. But I mean, it would make sense. I know that when marijuana was initially banned in 1937, the timber industry was largely to blame for it. One thing that I think was interesting, kind of another thing we haven't mentioned yet, as for a reason why Measure 80 didn't pass, I read in an article about the 3 states, Oregon, Colorado, and Washington, that were voting on whether or not to legalize recreational marijuana usage. Oregon was the only one that didn't pass, and one of the reasons they cited was because I guess there was a lot of backlash and negative publicity over the bill because some pot entrepreneur who was one of the main backers here in Oregon, I guess, failed to pay income tax in 2011 or something like that, which I thought was very unfortunate because as far as I'm concerned, that's a damn virtue. But
my hero.
Yeah, exactly. Good for him. But I mean, that's just a stupid, petty reason to be opposed to something.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people are looking for an excuse to hate something.
That's true.
So I would like to let everybody that's listening right now know that they can call in if they want to be a part of our discussion. The number is 1-718-717-8296. That's 1-718-717-8296. And I'd ask that you just stick with the topics that we're discussing tonight, and let us know if you have an idea for another show. Let us know if you want to talk about some of this off topic. That's something that we should talk about on another show. But if you're listening right now and you've got your phone ready, sorry we don't have a toll-free number yet, but we still have to keep the lights on over here and stuff, and we don't have any sponsors. So
we don't have a revenue stream.
No revenue at all. This is a work of love here. So that said, Emperor Obama is still in power, and then there's been a lot of news about the gun grabbers out there. Dianne Feinstein and the UN and our Senate, it seems to always sell us down the river. David, do you have any comments on this topic?
Yeah, I do. After you'd mentioned that to me this morning, it was the first I'd actually heard about Dianne Feinstein's new actions. But I do got some information on it here. Dianne Feinstein, of course, for those of you listening, is a Democratic senator from California. And basically, as soon as Obama got reelected, Feinstein started, I think just before he got elected, she started work on trying to bring back the 1994, quote, assault weapons ban that was passed during the Clinton administration and that thankfully sunsetted in 2004. That's, in the last 8 years, you've seen a huge explosion, the proliferation of AR-15s and other semi-automatic sporting rifles in the civilian market. And that was largely because for 10 years they weren't available at all. And now, they've came back in force, much to the chagrin of the gun grabbers. But one of the articles that I was reading, it was actually really interesting because, I mean, no one's read the bill yet. It's still something they're working on. But apparently some sources are saying that, not only does she want to bring back the assault weapons ban that was really only, banning cosmetic features. Basically, it banned pistol grips, high-capacity magazines, flash hiders, stuff like that. But it sounds like the wording of the bill she's currently working on would eliminate the grandfathering of older assault weapons and also ban the sales of weapons that people already have in their possession. That is a drastic change from the last assault weapons ban, which was bad enough as it was. But at least with that one, if prior to 1994 you owned an AR-15 or whatever, or an AK-47, that was grandfathered in and allowed under the law. Not only was it allowed, but you could still sell it. Any pre-ban guns could be sold, and that's even in like California, where they still have effectively an assault weapons ban, and where they have high capacity magazines and stuff banned. Any pre-banned guns you can still sell and transfer back and forth. So this should be interesting. I mean, if this was passed, I have more than a few guns that it sounds like the government would basically be expecting me to turn in, not just, oh, you can't sell this anymore, or you can't buy a new one. You have to turn it in. Now, obviously, I'd be up in arms, probably literally over either one. But
yeah.
This is huge. And of course, Obama supports the ban. He'd sign it into effect. Romney, I'm sure, would have as well.
Yeah.
Bush was on record saying that he would have extended the assault weapons ban, but by the time that it sunsetted in 2004, everyone realized that it was a complete waste of time. For those of you who aren't really familiar with guns, or who aren't terribly familiar with the 94 assault weapons ban, it really was basically a ban on cosmetic features.
Yeah.
It would be akin to trying to, ban sports cars, but saying it's okay if you just have a normal looking sedan with a sports car engine in it. They would your Mini 14, for example. That's one of the most egregious examples you can cite. The Mini 14, your standard Mini 14, is a semi-automatic 223. Never been a service military rifle, but it definitely it comes from the M14 and is very heavily inspired by military rifles that have been used in the last 50 or 60 years. Mm-hmm. That gun would normally be completely legal because it comes with a very basic wood stock, no pistol grip, no flash hider. But then you might have another Mini 14 that has a different stock on it that has a pistol grip. The same exact gun functionally, except for a cosmetically different stock, and one would be illegal and one wouldn't. And it sounds incredibly stupid, and that's because it is. And if you look up pictures, there's all kinds of pictures and charts you can look at. If you go to Google Images and search, assault weapons ban, you'll find things showing just how dumb it is. I mean, it really is just gun grabbers banning guns that they think look scary.
I think it also shows, David, that the people writing this legislation have no knowledge at all about guns.
Hey,
absolutely,
and that's fine. That's great. I hope we don't educate them. But I have to say, I have a Mini 14 too, and mine's a tactical model with a composite stock on it, and I've got a Picatinny rail that I could pop on, so I could drop a scope on it if I want. But the Mini 14 is called the Ranch Rifle by Ruger. And that's one of my favorite rifles. I just really absolutely love my Mini 14, and there's no way that I'd ever turn it in, for the record. But the best rifles that I have are my bolt actions. You know, they're fantastic, and they don't have a bunch of bells and whistles on them. Well, except for one of my Remingtons, it's got lots of bells and whistles on it. But you know, those larger caliber weapons, you know, like your 308, your typical hunting rifle, you know, they wouldn't be included in a lot of these bans, and you know, that's just fine by me.
Right, and you know what's interesting about that is that I think, you know, a lot of people, they really do just look and think, oh, this rifle's scary, that rifle isn't. But I would be way more scared personally, as someone who's, you know, knowledgeable about guns. I'd be far more scared of the guy with a, you know, Remington 700 308 with a decent optic mounted on it than I would be of, you know, some joker with a Mini 14 or whatever. And I think people don't realize that, you know, first of all, if you look at the statistics, the so-called assault weapons make up about 1.6% of all firearms in America. And yet they make up an even smaller amount of crimes committed. They only account for about 0.7% of all murders and are only used in 0.2% of violent crime. The simple fact of the matter is that not only are, you know, more simple weapons that people would probably say, oh yeah, that's just a hunting rifle, or that's just, you know, a hunting shotgun. 38 special revolvers and 12 gauge shotguns are probably the most commonly used firearms in crime, but no one but the most extreme gun grabbers would ever want to ban those. They'd think, oh, you know, that's just Grandpa's 12 gauge, or, you know, that's my dad's old 38 special, because they don't look scary. But then, you know, you show them a Glock or you show them an AR-15 and these scary black composite weapons, all of a sudden they get terrified, even though statistically not only are there less of them, but they're used in less crimes per capita. Mm-hmm. I read you know, you bring up how you'd be happy if, you know, you're glad that people aren't normally trying to ban at least bolt action rifles and stuff. I've got a couple bolt actions myself. I have a 308, a 243. I've got an old 303. I've got a lot of bolt actions. I read a great trilogy of books. It's called the Enemies, Foreign, and Domestic Trilogy. It's a little self-published book series by a guy named Matthew Bracken. He's a former Navy SEAL and a very libertarian individual. And the basic plot of the first book, it's called Enemies, Foreign, and Domestic. And it is about the ATF staging a massacre at a football stadium that kills something like 95 people get shot, and then a bunch more get killed, stampeding as they're trying to escape. They frame a guy, they do this whole big cover-up, and it's all just an attempt to get Congress to pass some emergency legislation that bans guns. They give everyone something like 2 weeks to turn in all semi-automatic rifles. And naturally, there are some people who don't, and they end up sort of fighting with the government over it. But it was really interesting because it sort of, there's a whole bunch of little branching subplots besides, you know, the central conflict and the central characters. There'll be little side stories that just show you these individual events happening surrounding all these other events. And one of them was a guy who assassinates one of the congresswomen who was behind the gun ban. And I always thought it was really funny because they just banned semi-automatic rifles in the story. And so this guy goes out with an old, you know, Mosin Nagant, like literally an $80 military surplus rifle with a cheap scope on it, and he just shoots this woman from several hundred yards away. And so then all of a sudden you have the gun grabbers who know nothing freaking out. What? This was an $80 rifle that this was committed with? This is totally legal still? So then they try to ban high-power optics, and it's just really interesting. I mean, the gun grabbers, they really don't know anything about guns, which, like you said, it is probably a good thing.
About Rafael Amoroso, that guy in Grants Pass, was.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was those books, and
yeah.
Did I ever tell you about that? That I was actually the one that had contacted the reporter and told him that that was the book it was?
No, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, that they actually knew that because I told them. I saw an article pop up, and I forget who it was who shot me a link to it, but I saw the article somehow. I might have even just found it on my own, but I saw it right after it happened, and I read it, and all I remembered was them saying it said something like he was at a football stadium and he had some guns. And he had a book about a massacre at a football stadium with him, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, he's plotting something!" And I immediately knew that they had to be talking about that book, and so I sent an email to the writer. I forget what his name even was, but I sent an email to him, and I told him, "Hey, I've actually read the book he's talking about. It has to be Enemies, Foreign and Domestic by Matthew Bracken," and I basically pointed out to him that this guy having that book shouldn't really mean anything because it's not like it's a how-to manual about massacring people at a stadium. It's about the bad guys doing it, and it's actually about the people who basically blow the conspiracy wide open and fight for justice. And the other thing is that they're acting like it's crazy, but the fact of the matter is there's probably no one who owns those books who doesn't own guns. I mean, they're books that specifically appeal to a gun rights activist crowd. And so I kind of set them straight a little bit on that. That was pretty interesting.
It looks like Amoroso was back in federal court for sentencing today.
Really?
Yeah, I think he's still.
I'd forgotten all about this.
This has been a total pre-crime-esque type of situation where I think this book has been given a lot of weight in his case. I mean, I think the only thing that he did wrong, he had a gun on school grounds, but he wasn't brandishing it or anything.
Which for example, concealed carry permit holders can legally do. I've carried legally on school grounds many, many times. What was his name? Was it Gabriel Amoroso? I don't even remember what his full name was.
Rafael Amoroso.
Raphael.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually, I don't even think he had the car or the gun on his person. I think it was in his car, and he had the book, binoculars, and a camouflage jacket. So,
it was really interesting when I first reached out to the writer of the article. He told me that he tried to find out what book it was from the police, and they wouldn't tell him. They're being really weird about it, and I thought that was interesting. Almost like they wanted to kind of put a spin on it without people sort of seeing what the book was actually about.
Mm-hmm. I think it's hilarious that they cited binoculars at a sporting event as a problem.
or even a camouflage jacket. I mean, I have a camo jacket. I have camo pants too. Sometimes I wear them when I need a jacket or pants.
Listen to this. I just looked up an article. I found one here on Oregon Live from this is August 8th, 2012. It says the 26-year-old self-employed handyman has been held without bail since October. That has to be talking about last October. This guy was in prison for what, 10 months?
It's been
unreal.
He's been in prison for like a year. I remember when we were talking about this at one of the Occupy events last year.
Yeah.
And so he's been in jail that entire time. And it looks like he was just sentenced.
So I'm just waiting for them to say that you might be a terrorist if you use binoculars at a sporting event.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds to me like the guy was probably just a survivalist, and that's about it. Like, oh no, a survivalist has a gun in his car. It's the silliest thing I've ever heard.
And I think there was, if I recall, there was a story that when he was a teenager, he shot at some people with a BB gun or a pellet gun who were rafting down the Rogue River. And
Yeah, that I remember that now. Which is stupid, but that doesn't show a propensity for violence. I have a friend who got in trouble for driving around shooting people out of the window of his car with airsoft guns when he was in high school. And now he's a former Marine, honorably discharged, or medically discharged, I guess, but honorable. Yeah, I mean,
we played with BB guns when we were kids. I always had a BB gun when I was a kid, and I don't remember. I never shot it at anybody, not even my brothers. We just do a lot of plinking and shoot some pesky birds like the starlings with them and whatnot. But I don't think that something that he did as a minor would indicate that he had an intent to shoot people at that game. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever to me.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, where
was the motive? There was really no crime going on except, if he didn't have a concealed carry. I don't know if he did or if he didn't have a concealed carry permit. He shouldn't have had that on school grounds. But again, some of those laws are ridiculous. So what's the law in the books that you can't have a gun within 1,000 feet of a school?
Which is actually only enforceable by federal officers. But yeah, that is the case. You're not allowed to have a gun within 1,000 feet of a school unless it is if you have a permit. Obviously, it negates that.
Right.
But unless it's unloaded and locked in your trunk, inaccessible, which, I mean, people break it all the time. Like just any random hunter driving back to his house going, a couple blocks away from a school, not even within, sight of it.
That has to be the state of your weapon when you're transporting it anyway, right? Has to be unloaded, inaccessible.
No, only if it's concealed. I mean, if you're just driving around town, not near a school or anything.
Yeah, I mean,
from
if you have
carrying a loaded handgun or having a loaded rifle just sitting in your car.
Yeah, right. But when you're transporting a weapon, I mean, are those laws that much different, than when you're, if you're driving, if you're following the law as far as transporting a weapon goes, a firearm, and you're within 1,000 feet of a school, have you broken the law?
Yeah, you could, because like I said, you could legally have a loaded rifle in your gun rack or, in your passenger seat or whatever, but
as long as
within 1,000 feet of a school, suddenly it's illegal.
Yeah,
I think they should put signs up on the roads that you are now you're now entering a school zone within 1,000 feet of a school zone. Disarm or something.
Yeah. I mean, how in the hell do you know that you're within 1,000 feet of a school?
Especially if it isn't the town that you live in.
Yeah. And so we are coming up on the end of this show. 30 seconds here. Guys. So, man, that went by really, really fast, and we covered a lot of material today. And, unfortunately, none of our listeners wanted to call in, but they could call in again next week. They could write down their comments or
they could leave us a comment on our Facebook page.
Yeah, we are on Facebook, of course, the globalist NSA spy tool du jour. And so you've been listening to Double Cross Radio. I almost said In the Lie. I was on Madison's show the other day. So you've been listening to Double Cross Radio with Drew Lamb, that's me, Chuck Horton, and Kirk West. And we are on every Thursday at 7 p.m. on ucy.tv. And please tune in again next week, and we'll do this again. Thanks a lot for listening, and thanks for coming on, you guys. Good night.
Good night.